Good morning. We'll call to order the February 22nd, 2022 meeting of the Delaware County Board of Elections. I am Gerald Lawrence. Joining me today is John McBlain and Ashley Lunkenheimer. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll rise and say the pledge. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. So we have the agenda. It was published and distributed. Any questions about the agenda? So we'll proceed. We have three sets of minutes to approve. The first are the minutes of November 9. The second is the minutes of November 12. And the third is the minutes of the November 18th certification meeting, which sat in recess due to court cases where there were orders of the court preventing us from completing certification of a few particular races in certain precincts for certain offices, et cetera. So that meeting was recessed and reconvened on December 22nd and February 2nd. I know the board had the minutes distributed yesterday, a chance to review them. Does anyone have any questions about the minutes?
No question.
Do we have a motion?
So move to adopt the minutes.
Second the motion.
Is there any public comment? Seeing none, no discussion, we'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the minutes say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Next, we have Mr. Allen's report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I have to tell you, this coming primary is going to be very difficult, and we, the members of your staff, are going to do everything we can to slug through what's shaping up to be a very challenging calendar. The reasons for our concerns are all external. This is all coming out of Harrisburg. Last summer, the Department of State warned all of the top stakeholders in Harrisburg that new maps for state representatives, state senators, and members of Congress needed to be completed at the very latest, by January 24th. And we're now a full month beyond that deadline, and not one of these maps are set, or is set. So the watchwords this year are for us to be ready and nimble, because everything about the calendar is uncertain. The only certainty is that it's running very late. And so we don't have maps. And we also don't know whether Act 77 will be ruled constitutional or whether it's going to die on the vine. So both the issues of the maps and Act 77 are the subjects of lawsuits currently before the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So as background, after every census, for the voting public out there, each state needs to draw new maps to reflect how populations have shifted since the last 10-year census. So they need to draw the maps to reflect the 2020 census. And the problems are occurring in states all across the United States with drawing the new maps, coming to some kind of agreement. Here in Pennsylvania, we've seen populations drop in rural areas and increase in suburban and urban areas. So for one person, one vote, the maps need to shift. Additionally, as much as we grew, it wasn't as fast as some southern states, so we're going to lose a congressional seat. So all this means we need new maps for state representatives, state senators, and members of Congress. After those maps are decided, each election authority, such as ours, has to move all of our voters into the correct new district lines. That way we can order the ballots for each precinct, program the equipment properly, and have the right ballots for voters on election day and in the mail for our absentee voters. So we're 84 days from election day, 12 weeks, and there are no maps. Worse, this has put a freeze on all candidates filing or circulating petitions. So candidates were supposed to be able to start circulating petitions a week ago today, but because of the lawsuits, all that's on hold. So we may get an answer this week on the congressional map. However, we may not learn the lines for state house and state representative districts until early or mid-March. And there are rumors that petition filing might be extended through March 29 for state house and state senate candidates. That's very late, because that means candidate objections would be in court in early April. Keep in mind, this is for a May 17 primary, and we won't be able to program the equipment or order ballots or do any tests or order the test decks until we know what's supposed to be on the ballot. And right now, that's looking like it might not occur until the middle of April. So that could mean the very first mail-in ballots wouldn't be able to be ordered or hit the mail until May 6th, just 11 days before the primary. So, and as for Act 77, the Commonwealth Court has issued a ruling, but the Supreme Court has stated this is all happening as just in Delaware County, we have 20,000 applications already from voters who are asking to vote by mail, either absentee or by mail under Act 77. So we're working to build contingencies such as notices to voters to warn of any challenges or changes or delays that result from the lawsuits. Additionally, we're going to be working with the Board of Elections solicitor to intervene on objections if necessary, on objections to candidates' petitions, to make sure that we can begin setting the ballot and leaving candidates on pending the court's decision. And then if they're removed from the ballot, we can remove them by way of notice to the voters. It's vital that we get the ballots on the press as soon as possible and be ready for Election Day. So your staff is going to do everything possible to make all this work. At the same point, it's important today, less than 3 months before Election Day, that we need to be very honest and open with our voters about the scheduling concerns that are out there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Allen. A couple of thoughts I had regarding your comments. First of all, I think they are appropriate in the spirit of transparency, as you mentioned. This is in the hands of the courts now. And as we learned a lot over the last 2 or so years, when there's been significantly more court intervention in the operation direction of the election, we are going to follow their direction. We are going to be ordered that this is the schedule, and we're going to have to follow it. And I think that you are prudent in trying to anticipate all the possible contingencies and being ready to act when the court tells us this is the plan. And, I think the voters need to recognize that it's not the Board of Elections, that, to the extent you say there's rumors that perhaps the petition period is going to be extended to this or that, recognize everything is speculation now. Our guess is as good as your guess from reading the newspaper. We have some persons here with experience that have seen these things play out before, and periods like in the early 90s that were shortened and so forth. So we know what the options are. We just don't know which one it's going to be. And it does create a tremendous amount of work for you and for so many members of our team who are here today. And we appreciate that. We have talented people who are experienced now, certainly much more experienced with the equipment than we were 2 years ago when the pandemic started and we were uncertain about the dates of the election, and we had to reset and reschedule and move the election. And so we know it can be done, but we also know that that is a tremendous cost of people's time and efforts. And in a period when we've had so much stress put on the system and our operations, to have this additional burden is going to be a challenge. And we're going to do our best, as we have, facing all the challenges we faced the last few years, and ensure that we have a fair election. That's ultimately what we're going to do. So I thank you for your diligence in pursuing this. I do think some of the specifics of what you said, the challenge period certainly presents a problem. I don't like having printing ballots and then people that are later challenged, their name appears on a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot. It does create confusion for the voters, and we're going to have to make a decision there, and we should start thinking about that. But there is ultimately a balancing test. Do you hold off sending ballots to the 430 precincts across the county because you have issues in one state rep district that just affects one little group? And there is certainly a balancing test of, are we going to go ahead and print them and somehow put a sticker on them or notice them or change them before they go out if a candidate's removed. But again, we'll have to cross that bridge when we get there, when we see what the schedule is and when we see what the things are. But that's an important question, I think, that we need to start to think about so that we're ready to act. And, you know, we may have to meet on short notice or something to accomplish that. But again, I thank you for your efforts in all these matters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody else have a comment?
I have a question. So obviously, over the last couple of years, we've brought together incredible resources to be able to address many challenges. But I just want to know, I would assume that if different lines changed, then voter registration will have a tremendous amount of work to get out potentially different voter notifications, voter registration cards noticing changes. Is that, maybe that's not true. Maybe the lines don't look that different. But I guess my question is that there that potential, and recognizing that that is a very slow and long process that requires certain printers and certain, do we have the resources, you know, available? And if not, is now the time to gather any resources that might be needed to address that type of concern? And any other resources that we might need to address the concerns, even though we have a lot of resources, they were targeted at different problems in the last couple of election cycles. This is a new set of challenges.
So far, so the good news on the congressional map is that of all the different variations that I've seen so far that are being considered by the court, Delaware County stays whole, meaning no matter what map, the 5th Congressional District takes in all of Delaware County. So that part is not uncertain. The filing period, however, meaning when the candidates circulate and file, and whether there's an objection in that case, either on the Republican side or the Democratic side, that could delay everybody's ballot. So that's the downside of that one. So that's the good news and bad news on the 5th Congressional District. The State House lines, the good news on all the maps and State Senate lines, is that so far we have seen that all of the precincts remain intact. So that makes our job a little easier. For example, in Allegheny County, I know there are a number of districts that are going to split precincts. And that requires, you know, being very careful to make sure that you move voters and give voters the correct ballots. You have 2 different kinds of ballots on Election Day. You issue the correct ones to the right voters. So far, all the versions of the maps that I've seen, whether Congressional, State House, and State Senate, should, knock on wood, make that process relatively easy, but still, anytime there's change, you know, we would like to have more time answering questions just, you know, from voters who say, why I used to be in the 165th, why am I in this, you know, now? And now we're not going to have that luxury.
I think one thing too that is noted in, you know, this board, we haven't moved a lot of precinct lines because we have a lot of other things we've been doing. People haven't been in here with petitions, but the board has historically required that we draw precinct lines consistent with the census tracts, and the result of that is, because the congressional districts are designed based on census tracts, our precincts tend to match up with the census tracts, and then the state house districts match up with the census tracts, so that when it gets redistricted, we don't have that cutting the precinct as much. We used to have it a lot more. There's very few examples of it now. And like, for instance, even in Radnor, in the last redistricting, we actually made another precinct to accommodate that when they cut a precinct. So, you know, we do still have some precincts that are historically not consistent with census tracts because they've existed in their current form for a long time. But that's a helpful thing that we need to remember when we're drawing precinct lines, is to keep them consistent with the census tracts. John, do you have any comment? No. All right. Anything else, Mr. Allen?
No, Mr.
right.
Chairman.
So the next matter is the designation of the interim voting machine warehouse supervisor, and it brings us to something that is very meaningful to me, that Mr. Jim Savage, who really jumped into the breach of things 2 years ago to take over the voting machine warehouse. We had a retirement there and a vacancy. We had new machines that no one in the county had experience working with, and then within a month or so after he took that position, the pandemic happened, and I think anyone who is even a casual observer of things in this county for the last 2 years will recognize that no one has worked harder than Jim, incredibly dedicated and resourceful, and delivered an excellent result of efficiency, of machines that worked, under really, really trying circumstances. And I know that I feel very personally indebted to Jim for doing what he did, and being so successful in it. Just tremendous integrity and dedication and hard work, and we're really indebted to you, Jim, for your service to this county over the last 2+ years. So we thank you. As I said to you when I heard the news that you were moving on, I'm certainly happy for you to have a great new opportunity, but really sad to lose somebody who's been an important member of our team. And I think my fellow board members probably have their own comments, but certainly on behalf of me and the board, I do very much want to thank you and applaud you for all your hard work. Thank you.
Jim, I too was very understanding, but saddened to see your departure. And I think the work that you did was important. It was important for this county. It was important for this country. You did that work under tremendous attack, including personal attack, unfairly, because the work you did was fair and honest and just and consistent with the laws. And so, but for those of us who appreciate and understand the laws and understand the work and the importance of the work you did, we will be forever grateful. I am forever grateful for your service. And so I thank you, and I do wish you the best of luck. And when you told me, as I said, please don't be a stranger. You're an important person, and we appreciate you. So thank you.
Thanks. And I'll say, I've had the opportunity to work substantively with Jim on 2 major things. First was the closing of the refineries and having those either open back up or other opportunities created. And the second is the 2020 election and moving forward. So what I'll say to Jim is, I hope in your next endeavor, it is nice and calm and peaceful.
Well,
And I'll point out too, Jim wanted to make sure I said nice things about him, so he wore a Naval Academy football jersey today, and that's doesn't go unnoticed. Although I think that's the commemorative jersey from the Air Force game this year, and the Marine one.
Marine Corps tribute jersey.
Yeah, that game didn't go so well for Navy, but it was a nice day.
Marine Corps Department of Navy. Managed to
oh man. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jim's, one of our 3 most valuable managers. And he's inarguably the most beloved across the staff, across all 3 major divisions of the agency. I could go on and on about how he's made the warehouse more efficient, how he realigned the cages, which is our term for election supply carriers, our rolling cabinets of supplies, and how he enforces down to temporary workers the notion that every cage needs to be identical, so that if it's a voter in Radnor or a voter in Chester, they're going to see all of those items and receive all those items exactly the way they should per the diagram, and they're going to have the same ease and setup of the polling place. But perhaps most impressive was, for me, I try to make the rounds visiting all the departments in the lead up to and then on election day. And I was there, they have a call center, and it's basically like a triage center to take calls, figure out what the magnitude of the problem is, talk to them, properly set up equipment, what have you. And the talk he gave right at the morning was all about how their mission was about to make sure that we respected every individual's right to vote, regardless of where they lived, how they were registered. That was our core mission, and this was our big day, and we needed to make sure that every individual voter had the right to vote, period, end of story. And he delivered it full-throated to a team right before the phone started ringing, and it was just the perfect message to set off the day, and it's a perfect indication of the kind of leader that he is. And the second perfect indication of the kind of leader he is that when there were emergencies that he had to be away from us ahead of the primary in 2021, there was a capable understudy in Jackie Dunn who was able to step in and handle it, and we did not skip a beat. And that's why I'm really pleased. Jackie is a veteran employee of the county, has worked in community services, and I'm very pleased. This is a bittersweet day to see Jim move on to a new job, but it's a recognition of his leadership that there's somebody in his organization who's ready to step up to the interim voting machine warehouse supervisor, and that's Jackie Dunn. And I would heartily recommend that the board make a motion and approve the placement of Jackie Dunn as the interim voting machine warehouse supervisor.
So moved.
Second.
So the motion being moved and seconded, is there discussion? I'll start. Obviously we all are familiar with Jackie and know that she's done terrific work as the assistant, and I have great confidence that she'll do well as the interim supervisor of the voting machine warehouse. So, anybody else? No. Is there any public comment? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries.
And let the record reflect that there's a huge turnout today of all the staff from other departments. So Jim and Jackie, congratulations to you both.
All right, well, Mr. Allen, you're going to have to tell me now, who does the polling place changes? Is it a last hurrah or is it a first try?
It's a last hurrah.
All right, Mr. Savage.
My leg fell asleep doing all that.
Well, we have somebody right there who can step in if your leg is still asleep.
I'm sure that Jackie's going to do a great job. In fact, with all the time she'll save from pushing me out of the way, may work out even better. I want to thank everybody for your kind words, and most importantly, I want to thank my colleagues and the staff of all these election departments over the past 2 years. They really are dedicated public servants who have dealt with just unprecedented challenges, and really, I'm really proud to have worked with them over the last 2 years. And this decision they made this decision harder than it probably should have been. And I appreciate all of you. I know you get paid a lot of money to do this and put up with what you got to put up with, but I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best moving forward. We have some changes. And I do have a couple comments on stuff coming up, but I would like to point out on the agenda, Middletown 4.1 and 4.2, I'd like to table that for this meeting. We've had further discussions with the municipal leaders from Middletown, and we think we have a better solution than we had originally contemplated.
All right.
So we'd like to explore that a little more, and that will probably come back to you at the next meeting.
Okay. Should we do a motion to table, mailing, or does it not matter?
I would recommend just
Okay. So do we have a motion to table the discussion on Item 7C, the Middletown 4142 precinct location change.
So moved.
Second.
Any comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's motion's tabled.
Also, I'd like to, along those lines, I'd like to thank the municipal leaders from Middletown and the township manager from Middletown who, over the past week and a half, have really sort of worked through this with us as we try to figure it out. It was very helpful. So we'll go in order here on the agenda. Aston 2 historically voted at PHCC of Pennsylvania. That's a plumber heating apprentice school on Mount Road. We moved it from there last election because they were, I'm going to say remodeling, but I mean, they gutted that building and like redid it from the ground up. The plan was at the time that we would move it for the one election and hopefully they'd be ready to move it back for this primary. We went, because of the new construction, we went out, gave a new inspection last week. Everything's fine. It's a beautiful building, beautiful facility. And we're ready to move that back to PHCC. And that's, I didn't get a hold of the Democratic leader from Aston, but I did speak to Mr. Barry, the GOP leader. He's been very helpful. And this has been the plan all along to sort of do the one election and move it back. So we're ready to do that. Do you want to take these one at a time or just do them, run
We
through
do them
them?
all together.
Do
None of
them
them
all?
are controversial, I don't think, so we can just do them all together.
Okay, so Haverford 2-1, we moved from Lanark Fire Company to Manoa School prior to the 2020 primary when we did the mass consolidation. We're moving everything out of where we had vulnerable populations and first responders. Lanark, the leadership at Lanark Fire Company is ready to receive voters into their building again. I spoke to both municipal leaders in Haverford, and they're both in agreement. So we have a bipartisan agreement there to move Haverford 2-1 to return it to its historical pre-health crisis location. And I think that the leaders there are working on, you might see some more from Haverford over the next meeting or two. And then the last one, Upper Providence 1, this really isn't a move, it's the same physical address. It's Pennsylvania Institute of Technology. They voted in a portion of the auditorium. That's going to be under construction. And our understanding from Fred Fivecoats, I had to say that name, I love it, who's the facilities manager there, been very helpful, is that once the remodeling is done, that the new configuration of the space won't be appropriate for voting anymore anyway. So they did offer the student dining hall. Went out there last month with a member of my staff. We had both Republican and Democratic members of the local election boards. I think there was maybe 4 of them or so that walked through with us. It's actually going to end up being a better space for them, I think, than what they originally had. And then that will be their permanent space. They're offering that to us permanently. There is, you'll see on the inspection report, there's handicap parking there, but it's not as close to the entrance to where the voters will go as we would like or as it should be. We're going to provide temporary handicap voting signs, handicap parking signs, and they're going to designate 2 spots directly in front of the door. That'll go out in the cage. They'll set that up on election day, and so we'll have, so the thing says, will be modified on election day. That's the modification we're talking about. So
Okay.
that's what we have for this meeting.
Yes, sir. So do we have a motion to approve the polling place changes for Aston 2, Haverford 2-1, Upper Providence 1?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is there any public comment? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of these polling place changes, say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries.
So then, just lastly, the last comments I would make, as far as moving forward, you all discussed the challenges we're facing with the things that are out of our control. You know, if they keep moving things back, and we have a May 17th primary, you know, besides ballots and all that, your window for logic and accuracy testing, I mean, the way I'm looking at the worst case scenario, you might have 3 days to try and do LNA testing on 400 precincts, right? I don't know how, other than throwing a ton of people at it, and not necessarily everybody's equipped to do that. Like, it's going to be challenging, and people are going to have to really, Jackie, it's going to have to really put a lot of thought into sort of how that proceeds, because whenever they squeeze you on the front end, they never move the back end, right? So it just keeps getting shorter and shorter. You know,
And optimally, you need about 5 or 6 days for LNA?
it's been taking us about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Right.
Okay.
So, and that's with experienced testers, right? So, like, we could throw 20 testers at it, but then they're inexperienced testers, and
Right.
for the first few days, they're not much help to begin with, right? And if you only have a few days to do it, I'm just saying it's something that's going to have to really be thought through. And I know that Mr. Allen will work with Jackie and get that figured out. I just want to, you know, make everybody aware that that is definitely going to be an issue. If the further they push it back, the worse it gets, right?
And so the public, I know most of the people here are the staff and understands this, but people watch this on television. We're talking about LNA is logic and accuracy testing, which is required by the statute, and it's essentially a series of protocols that you need to go through once the ballot is determined and the computer programming has taken place to test the scanners to make sure that they actually function appropriately and record things in a proper
And the
manner.
requirement is that each machine be tested in a way that we can confirm that it will accept a vote for every candidate on the ballot. So it's not like you're running one ballot through and saying, you know, okay, this machine works, and obviously in a primary, that takes longer because you have more candidates, right?
Right.
So, you know, a November election generally goes a little bit quicker because you've weeded out however many candidates in the primary, right? The primary LNA does take longer just by the nature of it. So, you know, that's going to need to be thought about. The other thing is we're going to have some problems in Upper Darby. We have 4 precincts that vote at Aronimink Elementary School. We were just informed last week that that's undergoing, I think, a major renovation or reconstruction, and will not be available for voting. And I will tell you that everybody at the Upper Darby School District has been just a pleasure to deal with, bend over backwards to help us whenever we needed to find a place. You know, well, how about this school? How about that school? The party leaders in Upper Darby, I'm sure they don't go out to dinner every week or whatever, but they've worked together really good, trying to help out when we had problems. This is going to be a problem because it's 4 precincts that is in a difficult area. Like we voted in basements in that area prior to making these moves, and that's obviously not optimal. Right. And then the Delaware County Human Services Building, I think it is. I think it's 4-7. That's under construction, so we got to figure that one out. And so I sent the email out to the party leaders, the municipal leaders. They've indicated that they'll sort of try and work on it, but they've all also said these are really tough ones, right? So we need to be prepared to sort of try and think outside the box and use all our resources, you know, reach out to everybody that we know in that area to try and find appropriate voting locations. So,
Thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So for the Upper Darby, it sounds like people are still working on it, but for the LNA, is there just the same question I had asked Mr. Allen earlier? It sounds like time is the resource you need for the LNA, and there's not, because you have to use experienced people to really be efficient and effective, right? Is there nothing else that you need that we could help you with besides, we can't help you with the time, we can hope for the time?
The only suggestion I would have at this moment, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? But if it gets pushed back as far as it could be, as far as we just talked about, you know, then you got to get a certified ballot. Then the county has to create the file, right? That takes some time. That's got to be all proofed and tested and all that before we can even start creating V drives to do the LNA, right? Like from the time the ballot's certified to the time V drives reach the warehouse to start LNA is typically a 4-day period or something like that, right? If they don't move something on the back end, I understand that may or may not be a possibility, right? If it's a May 17th primary, we have a 15-day prior to that deadline on the LNA, right? So you're talking early May. If we're not getting V drives to the last week of April, possibly, the only suggestion I would have is that we bring in a lot of people way before we need them, so that Jackie and the staff at the warehouse can spend time with them, just sort of doing practice run-throughs or whatever, so that we're not starting out LNA with, you get a new LNA tester, they might get through 3 precincts in a day, right? A week into it, they're getting through 10 or 12, right? I mean, it's just, they get better as they go along. You know, if you can get enough people and they're hitting the 10 or 12 right away, then that will help. But the best thing is somebody needs to think about, I don't know what goes into the statute as far as the 15-day deadline. Like, you know, can that be moved to a 10-day deadline or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, and that's all way above my pay grade, I know. But LNA is going to be a problem if they push everything back and don't move anything on the back end. LNA is going to be some challenges.
But that's a concrete recommendation. We bring in people to be trained at an earlier point than you might have otherwise done in order to try to accommodate that if we can't change anything on the back end.
That's the best I can think of right now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you all.
Next is Ms. Jackson with the campaign finance report.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So the Bureau of Elections has currently received a few campaign finance waivers. Last year, we found a more efficient way of policing how the campaign filings are completed, and as a result, there were a few that had some fees that were outstanding. So we received 4 of those were from candidates. We have Nicole M. Thompson, David Bartoff, Awilda Burgos, and Aaron Mathis. These are first-time candidate filings, and they're requesting a waiver of their fees for the periods of cycles 2, 3, and 5. And then we also have 2 committees, the First Republican Club of Aston Township and Friends of Timothy Cosgrove. They're asking for waiver of their campaign finance fees for reasons that are related to committee changes, like chairman changes, treasurer changes, and just things that were missed in the past.
All right. Do we have a motion for the waiver of these 6?
So moved.
Second.
And I heard you distinctly say it with respect to the individuals, but for these committees, this is also their first-time offenders.
Yes, they are.
ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
Is there any discussion amongst the board?
I just had a question on the first one for the Nicole Thompson. I know that the board had received complaints that were referred to the district attorney's office regarding that. Were these reports any part of those complaints? I mean, I don't want to take any action that might tie the hands of the district attorney.
The complaints did not have anything to do with reports, as best I can recall. That it certainly was not the focus of them, and as I sit here today, without the actual, information in front of me that I passed along, my best recollection is that there was no mention of the failure to file reports or failure to update the reports correctly or anything like that. But I can't say that with moral certainty without looking back at the materials. I also think that to the extent that there's there's probably two questions here, one of which is, within the authority of this board to waive fees, using its normal practices, and then to the extent that there's some other consequences associated with that. For example, if there was revealed upon investigation intentional misreporting, then I think that's a different question. And just because you've waived a fee using your normal rules doesn't tie the hands of the DA, would be my guess. It's certainly my impression as I sit here.
And secondly, I think we're also not adjudicating whether or not there was a violation here. This is more of the sentencing phase, if you will. We're waiving the fee. That doesn't change the fact that the reports were untimely or otherwise deficient. It's just we're have the courtesy for first-time offenders of waiving the fee until they
And just
figure
so
out
you
the
know, that
roles.
they all have subsequently filed reports. It's just they filed late.
Filed late, yes, yeah. All right, is there any public comment? Can we call the question? All those in favor of waiving the campaign finance fees for these 6 or 4 individuals and 2 entities, say aye. Aye. That motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
All right,
Anything else before?
Thank you. No.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. All right. Next is our next meeting date is scheduled for the 4th Tuesday of March. I don't know what day that is, but
It's also March 22, because February is the odd month where you have 28 days,
days.
4 weeks, so.
It was also pointed out to me that today's date is like all twos.
Yes, today is Tuesday, TWOS,
I didn't even get that.
because it's
That's
2/22/22.
That's pretty clever, Mr. Allen. And just so the public is aware, we have gone ahead and have made tentative plans to meet the 4th Tuesday of every month. We don't officially notice the meetings and have it actually scheduled as a meeting until we issue the notice for the meeting, because, for example, in the summer, we probably won't meet. We typically don't need meetings over the summer. We didn't meet in January. As we get closer to the election, there's more matters to handle and more likelihood to meet. But if you want to pencil it in on your calendar tentatively, 4th Tuesday of every month. So is there any general public comment today before we adjourn? Seeing none, we will adjourn. We are now going to have a meeting of the voter registration board. We were advised that even though it's the same members of both boards, and we would typically have a report from Ms. Winterbottom during the course of the Board of Elections meeting, that we should have a formal meeting and do it separately. So we'll call to order the meeting of the Delaware County Voter Registration Commission for February 22nd, 2022. The first order of business today is a report from Ms. Winterbottom, I think, on canvassing and return mail and national change of address.
I didn't know if you wanted to update that.
You can go ahead and describe the activities.
So we did a mailing comparable to like our regular NCOA mailing, that the permanent mail-in absentee applications, they found different addresses for voters. So that kind of flagged roughly 1,800. We marked their voter registration and mailed them an address verification notice. That was done a week or so ago, so those should be coming back. I think they started coming back, but we didn't process yet. So we'll start getting them back, I believe, this week.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this is a new process that we instituted when we were preparing for the annual mailing under Act 77, and that's before the court, the Court of the Commonwealth issued its order. We were mandated to go ahead with that mailing. When we were preparing it, you have to run it through pre-sorting software through the Postal Service, and the National Change of Address System flagged 1,800 records, as Ms. Winterbottom referenced, as people who likely have moved. So under the Help America Vote Act, federal law, we need to send notice to those voters that allows them to indicate whether this is a temporary move and they plan to stay in Delco, or whether to verify that this is a permanent move. And we can, so we're using this to clean up the voter rolls ahead of the primary. Additionally, we have, from the mailing itself, the items that weren't picked up by the postal software, we had several returned items, and these mostly were items where the voter registration did not have a unit number, for example. So we're going to take those and try to contact the voters and clean up the data in our voter registration system with the help of the voter to complete their registration.
And this is a supplement to the normal work where if you don't vote in 4 cycles, you get a card and so on and so forth.
Correct.
It's additional effort.
Yes.
Very good.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Just the returns, the ones that were returned for whatever reason, it sounds like a lot of them were lack of the unit numbers. Is that included within the 1,800, or is there a number in addition to the?
That's in excess of, or in addition to, the 1,800.
Have any idea about how many those were?
I just received a report of boxes, so we have to get the boxes of those. I don't know if it's 8 or 10 boxes.
I did not receive them yet, so I'm not
So
sure.
we have to get those from our facility in Chester to the voter registration department, and we'll get you a count later today.
All right. Anything else? Is there any public comment? No? Oh.
She actually had a public comment for the Board of Elections meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if this is germane for the, whatever.
Hi, I don't really want to interrupt. I did not hear that, and that's why I'm having a hard time hearing.
I'm sorry. But go
Is it
ahead.
okay to go ahead?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
So Margaret Mansfield, 2407 Seacane Road in Seacane. And it's primarily a question about the recent list that was posted for the poll workers and the polling places, where there seems to be significant discrepancies between the list for lottery winners and write-in votes that are listed on the election, the Bureau of Elections website, and that list of polling workers. And just one example, Holly Ricks in Ridley, is in Ward 1, Precinct 1. And she's listed as winning judge of elections, but she isn't on the list for being on a poll worker at 1-1. So
if
my request is that there be a pretty considerable review of that. And I have one other issue.
I don't want to speak to that individual's case because I don't know the circumstances. However, there is a process by which, if they win the lottery, in some instances, the individuals declined. In other instances, the individuals did not submit the paperwork. I'm not saying that's the case here.
Yeah, okay.
In other instances, yet, they won the lottery for both judge and majority inspector, and they obviously can't do both. So we were going to the second place, winner, if you will.
Okay.
So we've never had in Delco 700 participants in a lottery drawing, and as you can imagine, you know, it took a little while to untangle that fishing line, so.
I'm sure it did.
And get it straight.
I'm sure it did, and I just wanted to
thank you.
raise that as an
We'll look
issue.
at it, and secondly, if you have other specifics, in addition to Ridley 1-1, maybe you could submit them in writing to Mr. Allen. We'll
Okay,
look
and
carefully at those
yeah,
specifics.
okay, I will do
I
that.
do know a lot of work has been done by Ms. Iacona and by Ms. Hagan and others to try to sort through all these. It certainly, in times when we have had such difficulty in recruiting poll workers, it is refreshing to see such public interest in this, although because it was done by write-in, it was an incredible amount of work as opposed to the normal petition process and then they're on the ballot. And so it's a manual process, and we will make sure that it's right.
Thank you. I have one other issue,
Okay.
which is a departure from what we're used to in Ridley. There are two precincts that do not have bipartisan representatives in the polling places, 7-1 and 9-1. And I have some information that I'll just write to you. But the judge of elections, the majority and the minority inspector are all Republicans. That sort of flies in the face of bipartisanship, but also certainly not what we're used to. We're used to having one of the inspectors be from one political party and another inspector come from a different one.
And I don't know the specifics of this situation, but I know that it's this general idea of elected local election boards not being bipartisan, because we've had to look into this. The election code, which sets out thousands of requirements, has very specific requirements about appointments of people to the election boards, and specifically indicates that they have to be of one from the majority party, and then the complementary office would be from the minority party. So it would create that bipartisaness. The sections of the code that deal with election of the local election boards don't have that same specific requirement that the holders of those positions be of diverse parties. And while typically they are, because of the petition process to be in the nominated for the minority role and the majority role, that each party nominates somebody, and therefore they are of different parties. When you have this situation with the write-ins, we don't see where in the code it would require the board to be bipartisan or of diverse parties. And I know that's kind of an anomaly, and it seems odd, but we are familiar with this issue, and we were, Mr.
I
Parks
just raise it as something that is deeply
research.
troubling, and also
It does seem
it's,
fundamentally inconsistent
Yeah.
with the idea, but again, we follow the election code, right? We don't write the election code. So, I mean, perhaps it's something for, you know, if one of the political parties is interested in this, or some individuals interested in this, and they want to make a court challenge, if a court tells us differently, it does seem somewhat offensive to the bipartisan checks and balances that make the system work. And not to say anything about the integrity of these persons, it's just the appearance causes people concern, as it has you, and I think may others. But the board doesn't see what we can do to remedy this situation, given the state of the law. Certainly, somebody wants to raise this with a court and say, you know, the spirit of the code would imply that they should be bipartisan. Maybe a court will look at it differently and order some other remedy.
Thank you. I find that most unfortunate, but thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. All right, is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, we will stand adjourned until our next meeting. Thank you.